Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Fraternity Foodie. This is Mike Eilon with Greek University, and we call these interviews Fraternity Foodie because there is nothing like great food to bring people together. Today on the show, we have a very, very special guest who also loves food. So make sure you stay tuned all the way to the end so you can find out where she likes to go out to eat in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania. And with us today is a close personal friend, Dr. Thea Zunick, someone who I've worked with on multiple occasions over the years and helping to educate college students all over the Northeast. Welcome, Dr. Thea Zunick, to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me this morning.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Thea. So let's get right into the interview. I know we have so many important things to talk about here this morning. So number one, why did you choose TCNJ for your undergraduate experience?
You know, I had a really interesting start to my career in higher education. I was originally exploring a professional dance career, touring with Nickelodeon for a couple of years. So really fun fact, I can no longer use that story for two truths and a lie because everybody now knows it's a truth. And in between tours, I would sign up for classes at the local community college. And as I was wrapping up my associate's degree, I started to look at four-year institutions and tried a couple of different places, visited some campuses, and ultimately landed at the College of New Jersey because of the experience I had on the day that I visited that campus. I had been at another institution which wasn't quite feeling just right. You know, when the universe sends you signs and you're like, I gotta listen to these. So it was time for me to find a different place for me to finish my education. I rolled up on campus. It was a gorgeous spring day. The trees were in bloom. It was SGA elections. And immediately I fell in love with the campus. Everyone that I spoke to really talked to me as an individual. They cared about me as a transfer student. They had special housing for transfers and orientation. And we're talking, a couple of years back before the dedication to transfer students was really a thing. And so I felt valued, I felt cared for, I felt like a part of the community since the second I walked onto that campus. And that feeling just kept multiplying as the day went on. And I knew by the end of that day that this was the right place for me. And I decided that day that that's where I would go and never looked back. And it was one of the best decisions that I could have made for me personally and professionally.
Wow, that is unbelievable. I mean, just to have the perfect weather, perfect welcome, it was just meant to be. So there you go.
All that they're welcome mat. They're like, yeah, come to us. And really, I mean, it couldn't have been any better for me that day.
That's incredible. So what made you want to join Phi Sigma Sigma there, and what was that experience like for you as an active member?
So back in the day, I used to call it my mandatory fun. So as a transfer student, you miss the opportunity to find your community sometimes because you haven't lived on a freshman floor in a residence hall. You didn't sit in the first year classes saying, oh my gosh, what's going on? I was a little bit older as a student as well because I had that other career and went to, Middlesex Community College at the time it was called. And so I was searching for that opportunity to find my friends. I had become an RA my very first year there. In fact, they recruited me from my transfer orientation to be an RA my very first year. So already I had oversight over the people I was living with. So clearly couldn't hang out with those folks. I joined the dance team immediately, and that was a lot of work. I mean, we worked out, we danced, it was work. I joined student government, obviously, the very beginning. And so I was doing a lot of stuff, but I said, I need some fun. I need somebody that I can call at 2 a.m. to go get ice cream with. So somebody said, did you think about ever joining a sorority? I said, no, not really, but okay, let's check it out. Went through recruitment, ended up noticing that the room that I spent the most time in where I felt myself was the Phi Sigma Sigma room. And that's eventually where I ended up getting matched to. And there was so much opportunity to really take charge and become a leader in the organization because the organization needed that. And naturally, I kind of rise to the occasion when leadership opportunities are open. So it was a good fit for me. It allowed me to explore some new talents and also allowed me to find that mandatory fun and that community that I really needed.
Love it. I'm happy they were there for you, and that's fantastic. And you also got your master's from the University of Florida. You went on to get your doctorate, of course, at Rutgers as well. So your dissertation was focused on the effect of academic performance when implementing living and learning communities in fraternity housing. So I am so curious about this. After you collected all of this data, what was your interpretation of the findings? And I'm also interested in how did that fit into the larger context of the field's existing body of knowledge on this topic?
You know, Mike, obviously I love fraternity, and I became frustrated as an undergraduate researching fraternity because there's so much out there on the problems and the issues, and there wasn't a lot of focus on solution. So I looked at a couple of different organizations, and I had started to volunteer for SIGAP early on in my career and learned about their residential learning community program. And I said, this is really different. This is a solution. And SIGAP did a really good job of saying that students in these programs perform better academically, but hadn't really conducted the research on the meaning, the why, what else was going on, what else were they experiencing, how was it different than a regular just chapter. And you know, when you think about it, when you put a bunch of young men in a house unsupervised, I mean, what's going to happen? I don't know. And through my years working with fraternities and reading the headlines and just stuff that was going on, I realized that there was a common link between a lot of the incidents. And many of these incidents occurred in the house. And SIGEP had realized the same thing. And so they said, why don't we create some structure? And through some research, they identified the residential learning community model as a model that, when implemented on a university campus by the residence life or res ed departments, that regardless of the structure of this RLC or Living Learning Community LLC, there was a positive outcome, whether it was increased academic performance, persistence towards graduation, a higher sense of belonging, more likelihood to have conversations with professors, more likely to seek out professional development. And so really, no matter which way you structured it, you couldn't go wrong. So SIGEP took the on-campus model and made it work for their houses because it's a little bit different. And what I found was some fascinating things. And, you know, you have to take some of the research with a grain of salt because you don't know what it looks like on paper in actuality. And so I really honed in on the one chapter that I was working with at the time, which is the New Jersey Alpha RLC, which is the Stevens Institute of Technology chapter that had implemented the residential learning community. And because I worked so closely with that chapter, I knew they were doing a good job. And I looked at their scores, I looked at their GPA. I mean, what used to keep the president up at night was how do they increase their GPA every single year when it's already so incredibly high? I mean, you're thinking of like a 3.6 average GPA and a chapter of 80 plus men at a STEM institution. Doesn't that blow your mind?
Mm-hmm.
And when you look, you know, when I walked into their house, the care and pride that they took in that living space, you can tell that this was a place where men went for friendship, for academics, you know, all the things that you hope and dream for. They said, what's different here? And while you can't say necessarily that the RLC caused this, you can say it's highly correlated to a lot of the outcomes. So some of the things that I learned is that this program results in increased GPA, increased like academic performance, engagement. Their interactions with faculty is a lot more comfortable and frequent for them. And some of that has to do with a faculty fellow that generally has office hours in the physical space, which I think is really neat. And they also have a mentor that's a grad student that lives in that house. And so you're having somebody living in that space who serves as a role model. One of the interesting things that I found is that the men were a little bit less connected to their campus, but on face value, you're like, oh, that's concerning. But if you really dig into that, it might be because their needs are being met within their fraternity, within that environment, that community, because they're bringing everything in for the men. And so they're getting a robust, intimate experience that's tailored to them specifically, rather than sitting in a general leadership session that's for any old student on campus. And I think it's really fascinating how, their Balanced Man program and this residential learning community model really kind of blends together for this premier fraternal experience. And when it's done right, it's really powerful and really impactful. And so the men in that house had such a strong brotherhood, and it's because they genuinely care. They spent time together. If they wanted to engage, if they were 21 in drinking and whatnot, they still did that. That didn't mean that they didn't go to a bar and have some drinks. It just wasn't in their living space. Their house was, where they came to learn and where they came to develop authentic friendships. So it's a completely different environment. And I think it could be a potential solution to some of the issues that we're really seeing in fraternity houses and even in some sorority houses. I don't think that these organizations are exempt in culturally based organizations, even though less culturally based groups have a giant house or something. But there are groups that are at least living together in off-campus apartments. And so we want to look at a little bit more structure. There's a reason why residential life departments exist.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
I think
that's
it really calls for that.
Yeah, this model is incredible. I hope that other fraternity headquarters, sorority headquarters look at that model and say, hey, there's something here, especially with that mentorship that you talked about, living in the house. That makes all the difference, I found. And that might be some secret that more groups need to look at. So that's fantastic information. Now, you've also worked at Iona, you've worked at NJIT, you've worked at Stevens Institute of Technology. Most recently, you were at the University of the Sciences in Philadelphia as their director of student life. So it seems to me that you have an affinity, I think, to tech schools and tech students. What makes that so appealing?
Mike, it's funny. I kind of fell into it accidentally in my second job, and I realized working with STEM students is incredibly rewarding. I find that, and this is just my anecdotal, research, I find that those students need what we do even more than the liberal arts students. They're brilliant, and they have so much going on up here, but they don't always know how to get it out. And putting them in the environment of a fraternity or sorority really causes them to get outside of their comfort zone. It gets them to engage with others. It gets them to be comfortable standing up in front of a room, influencing other people, sharing their ideas, and getting other people to buy into what they have to say. It teaches them interpersonal skills, intrapersonal skills. It teaches them networking. It teaches them physical management. It teaches them how to have fun and let loose once in a while, because those students work really, really hard. They put so much pressure on themselves. And, kind of like how I was looking for that mandatory fun, this does the same for them, I think. And I find that these students in general are just so hungry for these experiences. Sometimes you have to encourage them a little bit. And once they get into it, at the end of their time in their membership as an undergrad and even graduate level membership, they've really grown exponentially. And I still hear from students from NJIT that say, Thea, I'm really involved in my professional architecture association. I'm the division, vice president, and that's opened so many doors for me professionally. And I would have never been able to get to that point had I not been in my fraternity and had I not worked with you one-on-one when I was president of the Interfraternal and Sorority Council. And so I think that this experience brings so much value, and I find that the students I've worked with are just genuine, kind-hearted, good humans. And when they make mistakes, they're making mistakes not intentionally. They're doing it, by accident, and they're so open to feedback. They're so open to growth. I find them so fascinating. I learned so much from these students. They really are incredible. I walk around at their senior design project fairs and innovation days, and I look at the stuff that they're studying, and it's just mind-blowing. It really is. Mm-hmm. And I know them in a totally different environment, but when you put it all together, the whole person of that student is really incredible.
Yeah, your perspective is great. I hope that more administrators listen to that and hear the value that you're talking about in this experience, because I do think it's important. And certainly they're not perfect. They make mistakes, as you've acknowledged, but there's a lot to work with here, and I think it is a valuable piece of their experience overall. The other thing that yeah.
Oh, I think one of the funniest things is when fraternity sorority advisors get together sometimes and they're talking about risk management issues. With STEM students, it looks very different. I think
Mhm.
most famous incidents is I had a fraternity house and they were extremely creative. They had a gas propane grill on their backyard and their deck, and they wanted to be more efficient. So they figured out how to tap into the gas line of their house to hook up to the grill so they'd have permanent gas. Now, on one hand, I'm like, pretty brilliant. And on the other hand, I'm like, what are you thinking? Critical. They're like, but we knew what we were doing. I'm like, just because you're an engineer doesn't mean you can practice engineering on your own house. So it's it's endearing. Like I said, sometimes they make poor choices, but gosh, they come by it honestly sometimes.
Right. That is a very endearing story, and I think it's a good summary of what sometimes you might deal with.
Yeah.
That's great. Now, one of the other things about you is it seems like everybody knows Thea. We've gone to so many conferences together. Everybody knows who you are, both administrators and also the students. The students seem to really love working with you. And so, what is the secret in building those meaningful relationships with the students so they feel like they can confide in you, they can trust you, and they reach out to you when they need help?
I mean, at first, it's very humbling, to hear that because sometimes I'm like, I'm just me, I just do my thing, and I joke around. I'm like, oh, people just know me because I've been around so long and I volunteer a lot, and that's all. But I think it has to do with, as you mentioned before, the relationship building. I am lucky that my personality is such that, I put myself out there. I'm very open, friendly. I will talk to anybody about anything that they want to talk about, because I think learning about other folks is really interesting, and them learning about me, and that, back and forth is such a wonderful thing. It's really important to be transparent with people when meeting them because I think it shows a level of vulnerability. And if you're willing to open yourself up to others, they hopefully will feel comfortable to do the same with you. It's really important to invest the time in the relationships. If people would like to sit down with me at a conference, let's make time. Let's figure out how to make that work. Even if I've got to get up at 6 in the morning and have breakfast and coffee with somebody, I'm going to do it. Fully transparent. I am not a morning person, and part of me is like, oh, why did I do this to myself? But after that meeting, it's always been worth it because I've been able to learn so much, and I've been able to share what I've learned with others. Um, I speak to the students like they're people. I treat them as equals. And I think one of the other things that's really built me a lot of street cred with students is my volunteerism, and they see that I love their organizations as much as they do. And when I can use language where I, can pull out their values, or I can talk about some leadership programs that their national organization offers, or I can talk about the fact that, I shared a service experience. So for example, like Delta Upsilon, I've gone on the Global Service Initiative, which is one of their largest philanthropic initiatives, their Project Jamaica, which is their partnership with campuses. I went as a professional twice. Took my students. And so when I'm working at with volunteering at the BU President's Academy, I can talk about my experience engaging in their service project. That gives you some street cred, you know.
I think you're
And whether
absolutely right
it's
about that.
yeah, you got to speak their language. You got
Right.
to let them know that you've learned about their organization and that you know about their organization and they care. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people can say about me is that I truly care about the fraternal community. And even if it's an organization that I'm not as familiar with, I ask questions. Like my Lambda Upsilon Lambda men at Stevens, I just asked them millions of questions. So I was like, okay, when you're stepping and you do this movement, during your stroll, what does that mean? Can you tell me? Tell me about your initiatives that you're implementing in your men's development programs and your national education program. I ask questions. I learn as much as I can, and I show up as much as I can. I show up when it's meaningful. When they have their probates and I can be there, I'm there.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's your knowledge of all of these different organizations. You stay current and up to date on all of their different initiatives. And sometimes I feel like you know more about these organizations than the member themselves in many occasions. And so that is just really illuminating for people. And they look at you and they go, wow, this is somebody that's truly invested in Greek life, is invested in me as a student because she knows so much and she's willing to share that with me. And that just shows that you care.
I
Fantastic.
do. Genuinely find it so fascinating to learn about other groups too, just that what makes them work and what they're working on and where they're struggling with and how can I help.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. And speaking of helping others, you volunteered so much of your time helping other fraternities. I know you've done a ton of work for Sigma Phi Epsilon. You talked about Delta Upsilon and their trips over there, Beta Theta Pi as a presenter and also as a facilitator. So, what makes these organizations so special to you?
I spent a lot of time with those particular fraternities for a couple of reasons. One, I'm very dedicated to the men's fraternal movement. I find that we're focusing so much on women, and sometimes we need to also focus on the men because they're part of the solution as well.
Mhm.
And that's part of the reasons why when I did my research, I focused on fraternities. And I really believe in a fraternal movement. I believe in the experience that it can provide for especially young men. They really need this. You read all these books and these blogs and, Kimmel's work, and I just am so inspired by that. And I'm looking to spend my time, and, as I get a little bit older, a little bit, I want to make sure that when I'm volunteering and I'm giving up my time, it's for organizations that are moving the needle forward. And these particular three, for me, in my opinion, are really at the forefront of the fraternal movement. When you look at the executive directors of these three groups, they are doing the work. They're putting the hours in. They are hiring some incredible professionals. I mean, look at their rosters. And even though, and I think sometimes even though they're larger fraternities, there's also some smaller fraternities that are really doing that same thing. They're being intentional about where they're investing, how they're investing, and who they're investing in because your staff are so important.
Mhm.
When you look at these three groups, I just volunteered for all three actually at the beginning of this academic year, and they're all talking about the same thing. They're all moving forward with substance free housing. And even though it's a really difficult conversation, and they are fielding a lot of angry emails and phone calls and this, that, and the other thing, the people who are angry are not part of the solution, and they know that. They're focusing on the undergraduates that are going to be coming in the next couple of years. They're really preparing their current students to have these conversations and let them know when you're recruiting, you need to let people know that this is the direction we're moving in because this is a non-negotiable. This is what we're doing. We know that these environments need to be clear and free of any substances. Doesn't mean you can't drink. It's just not in the house. It's somewhere else. This is our space to learn and grow as fraternity men. This is our space to have community. We want it to be done right.
Yeah.
And so while it not be popular with some of their members, they are not afraid to take that risk because we have to change what we're doing. We cannot keep doing fraternity and sorority the way we are because it is not going to survive.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's why these particular organizations, they're minimizing the risk. So you can see that in terms of the number of incidents that they have relative to their size, I think is important. I think looking at their educational programs, they're fantastic. And they're getting the best men on campus, right? They're getting people that that message resonates with them. So I think it's so important. And I think that's why they've had so much success recently is because of that.
Right.
You know, exactly what you highlight. Yeah.
Are
Now,
brilliant. You look
I
at
also think, yeah, go ahead.
was to say, the people writing the curriculum are brilliant. I look at like Noah Borton's curriculum that he's written for a lot of the DU programming.
Hmm.
It is succinct, purposeful. They reevaluate it every year, and every year that I've facilitated the President's Academy, it just gets better and better. And they're not afraid to reinvent. They're not afraid to look at what's next and take some risks and really drive the conversation forward and really challenge their men and make sure that every minute spent is purposeful.
Yeah.
And as a facilitator, we look at how easy is it to pick up and execute? And so I appreciate, I mean, all three of those organizations do a fabulous job of execution. And even just, I went to Beta's a training because I'm a chapter counselor for the colony at my undergraduate at TCNJ.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was actually being trained. So it was a very unusual experience for me to sit on the other side and not be facilitating, but learning. But as a new chapter counselor, it was time for me to do that. And I appreciated how they were strategic about scheduling the President's Academy at the same time as our advisor training. And we had some joint sessions so that I heard directly what my president was hearing, and they heard what I was hearing. So
Mm-hmm.
we would have conversations together as a group. And so just the way that curriculum was woven in together, I thought was, I mean, it made a lot of sense. So we
Mm-hmm.
were able to accomplish so much in those 2 days. It was really awesome.
Yeah, and that educational programming is consistent across the board for almost all of their chapters, 100%. And so I think where other organizations might be struggling is because they don't have that consistency built in to their entire organization to represent the brand the way that they want. Other fraternities, educational programming is done differently in every single chapter, and I think you run into problems that way. So, all right. And I know that everybody seems to know you at places like NGLA and AFA. So, why have you donated so much of your time to these organizations? And the other thing that I noticed about you is that you spend lots of time with the first time attendees at these conferences. So, why is that?
Mike, there's a couple of reasons. I volunteer for NGLA, AFA, and NASPA also because they're the ones who are investing in their people. They are the ones to make sure that we are learning, we are networking, we are connecting. These three organizations have done so much for me personally and for students because we're all in this together, right? And these associations are looking at how can they advocate for us, how can they help develop us, how could they help connect us. And so because I've gotten so much from these organizations, it's important for me to be able to give back as much as I can. And volunteering is one of the best ways that I can do that. And then also encouraging folks to attend their conferences too. So I'm out there letting people know, you got to go to NGLA. At U Sciences, we just sent our first delegation to the conference recently. In fact, we think ever. And that was back in February. And that was really neat to be able to send some students. And they came back and they were like, wow. They're like, I'm so glad we went, Thea. We're so glad that you pushed us. Like, there was so much we learned. And so that was a huge win, I think, for NGLA, because it really just shows the value of the experience of not only the conference, but the people who run the organization, and the fact that it's volunteer driven. And it really shows the value that it provides consistently. I always have a great experience, and sometimes learning happens in the room, and sometimes learning happens outside of the room. And when you mention the first timers, there's a couple of reasons why I dedicate a lot of my time and energy to supporting first timers, especially at the AFA annual meeting. One is when I was a new professional, I didn't really have a mentor in the field of fraternity and sorority, and so I was kind of out there floating by myself. And I had some mentors, but not specifically in the fraternity and sorority world. And it took me a little while to identify my people, but I found them. And it just showed me how valuable somebody can be to a new professional as a mentor. I still remember standing at my very first annual meeting with that first timer ribbon on. And I was so overwhelmed, even as someone who's an extrovert who will talk to everybody. And that feeling that I had in that moment drives me to really support these first timers because I never want anyone to feel like that. AFA is a big, big thing. It's a big animal. And so I can help mitigate any kind of uncertainty or anxiety or apprehension or nervousness or excitement for these first timers, I'm going to do it. And the other thing is, and this goes back to a UIFI that I was facilitating at many years ago. I was talking to my friend, and she said to me, Thea, she said, my first AFA was really tough. She's like, I ate by myself a lot. I didn't get to meet a lot of other first timers, and it was just kind of overwhelming. She said, I'm now like a boss at it now. I'm great. I can talk to anybody. I walk in the room and I feel like I know a lot of people, but And what she said really resonated with me. I said, we need to do a better job. I know that we have programs, but there's not enough. And so I know that a lot of people are investing a lot into some first-timer programs. I said, what can I do? And that's when I created that first-timers dinner where I said, all right, everybody, if you're going to be new or you know somebody who's going to be new, and then that's when I brought Tina Van Steenbergen in with me to co-host the dinners, because she's another one who just knows everybody. She's so warm and welcoming and remembers everyone's name. So she and I started co-hosting the last couple of years. And we had just such a good time meeting these folks, and we've kept in touch with a lot of our first timers, and they've kept in touch with each other. And if I can impact even just a small group of people, they will have a ripple effect on others. And for me, it's so worth it.
Yeah, that's a huge contribution to some of these new members, and I know they all appreciate it. So I'm saying thank you on their behalf, because that really is just an amazing contribution that will pay dividends for our industry, for other professionals, and ultimately for the students for decades. So thank you for the work that you and Tina and others have been doing. That's just fantastic. And I know now you're kind of starting a new phase in your life. You're starting to do training and development for corporate accounts, for higher education partners, for fraternity and sorority headquarters. And all of this is so new and exciting for you, I'm sure. And one of the areas that I see that you're specializing in is Change Style Indicator, or CSI certification. So what is Change Style Indicator, and ultimately, how does that help your clients?
You know, Mike, I felt it was important to learn a little bit more about this idea of change and to go through a certification process to be able to facilitate dialogue on change. And so this program, it's called the Change Style Indicator and Change Style Management. And what it does is it helps you work with your clients to identify their preferred style of change. It kind of is on a continuum. There's 3 different main styles that they have identified. And it really helps you kind of create an appreciation for change style diversity, and knowing that people approach change in different ways, and no way is better than the other. It's just how they do it. And so they're more aware of how they can handle it. And when you're working with a company or with an organization, things are changing all the time. And so being aware of how you feel most comfortable with change and how to manage change within your organization is a really valuable tool. It's one of the reasons why I focused on that, because change is like, whether it's personnel change or even dealing with the change of type of student that's coming into the institution, or say there's a corporate merger and you now have 2 major organizations that used to be competing organizations coming together. They've merged teams. There's a supervisor from this team and you know, a marketing and PR intern from that team, and you've got people from different ideals coming together, and you need to figure out how to fuse that. And my inspiration came in because the position that I had come into at U Sciences was as a result of a major staffing change. And one of my jobs was to come in and create a community in this team of people who had never worked together before, with me as a brand new supervisor, even with other new personnel coming in. And I realized how important handling that change was to the success of the personnel.
Wow, you're absolutely right. People in companies, in any area of society, they resist change, and it's difficult, but it's necessary to move the organization forward. So I love that you're offering this. I think it's important to every company out there to look into that for their employees. I think there's big value add in training employees in this change style indicator. I also know that you're doing EQ, or emotional intelligence certification. So tell us, how does that help your clients?
So I actually just finished my certification. So yay!
Yay!
The certification that I got is EQI 2.0. So it's the updated version of the emotional intelligence certification, and also EQ 360, which is a 360. And I'll tell you what that is. And no, that's not spinning around saying emotional intelligence. My bad humor. I'm a corny joke. So. I can't help it. Anytime I present, I let people know, listen, at some point, a corny joke or 2 is going to fly. Feel free to laugh at or with me. Either way, as long as we're having a good time and you're learning, that's the point here, right?
Right.
All right, so emotional intelligence is a set of emotional social skills that really collectively establish how you express yourself to other people and really how other people perceive you. You know, how do you kind of show up? How you cope with challenges, how you work with people, how you understand people, how you can read other people's emotions, and how other people are kind of reading your emotions. It really makes you more aware of how you're using emotions, either in the workplace or in your really personal life in a healthy and effective way. I'm really kind of excited about it because I think that the measurement tool is one of the strongest out there. The reliability and validity tests of this measurement tool is really strong. I think they're very serious about making sure that in order to be able to give this test to people, you have to be certified to be able to use it and access it. Um, it's based on 5 main scales. There's 15 subscales, and then there's also a well-being indicator, which I thought was a really neat component. It's not factored into your score, but it really kind of gives you insight into how you feel about yourself at that moment. The good thing about the emotional intelligence scale is it gives you kind of a range of where you fall, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're good or bad. It really just means how you show up and how comfortable you are using that skill. Some of the skills are, empathy or flexibility or self-regard or independence. And I think it's very useful for individuals to kind of know where they are and how they show up. And it's also useful for corporations and businesses and offices to know where their teams are at, because you can get a team report or a leadership report. There's a lot of different ways that you can use this in learning about yourself and others. And the 360 part, which I found fascinating, is you have other people take it. So say, for example, I take it, my manager takes it, and my manager scores it based on how they think I show up. And then you can send it to friends and family members. And there's a whole way that it's scored to make sure that you don't actually know who's saying what about you, because you have to have a certain amount of people in each category. Otherwise, it defaults to other. I'm really getting nitty gritty here, but I can picture people saying, oh gosh, people are going to, score me. What's that going to look like? But it really shows you, are there congruencies amongst how you think you show up and how other people say you show up? Or are there incongruencies or inconsistencies to say, like, wow, I thought I was really empathetic, but across the board, people aren't seeing that from me. And so maybe that's something I need to spend more time developing or being more cognizant when I'm interacting with other people of my level of empathy for them. I think it's,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's fantastic. I love that the employees get to leave with that certification, with that knowledge base, which is great. I was actually just talking to a friend who was visiting from North Carolina. He was in Nashville this weekend. We hung out, and he was talking about this in his company, this emotional intelligence. And so I have a lead for you. Remind me, I'm going to send you his contact information because this is exactly what he wants, and he represents, I would say, 10 to 15 offices across the United States for his organization. So I think every company is starting to look at this, and they can get a lot of valuable information by doing this certification with their employees. So that's great. All right, so now, our favorite part, I know that you're a foodie because I follow you on social media. You're posting such fantastic foods. And I think that's one of the reasons why we get along so well is because we both love food. And so I know you're relatively new to Philadelphia. You've been there for, a short amount of time. But in that time, I also think you've had some opportunity to taste some of the local foods. So what is your favorite restaurant now in Philadelphia, and what should we be ordering?
Well, okay, so I can't give you a favorite restaurant.
Okay.
I'll give you a couple.
All right.
Because there's something for everybody, and depending on what mood I'm in, And listen, you can drop me in a city for 1 week, and I'll find some good spots. I've had a year and a half here, so I've done a lot of eating through Philadelphia. So my first favorite place is a place called Butcher Bar, and Butcher Bar is a really makes you feel good kind of food inside, whether it's like the bourbon drinks that they make, or they've got some really great sausages on their menu. There's a side dish with cauliflower and broccoli, and at first you're like, well, that sounds really healthy. No, they do something with like a balsamic drizzle that's like magic. So definitely order that.
Mhm.
A couple of other places. A new place that just opened up recently is called Giuseppe and Sons. I'm not Italian, but I tried. Really great, authentic Italian. I spent some time in Italy last year and the year before, and it's been the closest that I could find to real Italy experience. Like, I close my eyes and I can almost picture myself in, Florence or that whole area over there in Tuscany. Anything you order on their menu is fabulous. Everything that I've had was unreal. A really quick, easy go-to spot that I love where you can get extremely affordable sushi, and I almost don't want to talk about it because I think it's going to ruin it if people just all go there, because it's a very tiny place. There's like 8 seats at the bar, there's 1 table for 4, and that is it.
Wow.
It's called Vic Sushi, VIC, and you can go in and get 3 rolls for $12.
Woo!
Cannot beat that. Oh
Yeah.
Yeah. When I'd come home late from the office, I would stop there probably once a week.
That's fantastic recommendations. I miss authentic Italian food. Living in Nashville now, I feel like I don't get any of that. So
Yeah.
I would love to hit that place up next time I'm in Philly. Let's make that happen. So that's excellent recommendations there. Now, if somebody is, yeah, all right. So if somebody's, okay. So if somebody's interested in working with you at their institution, they want to work with you in their corporation, or maybe their fraternity and sorority headquarters, what's the best way to connect with you?
So there's a couple ways. You can just find me on LinkedIn. There's some information about what I can offer and how you can connect with me. Just search for Thea Zunick. My email is pretty simple, theazunick@gmail.com. But the other thing I am really excited about is about 1 hour ago, and this is real time from this recording, I launched my website for my professional speaking and consulting career, and it is theazunick.com. So just my first name, THEA, last name, ZUNICK.com. Like, it's official. It is there. It's a work in progress, but aren't we all? So if you have any feedback, I'm always open to that. If there's information that would be helpful for me to have on my website, just say, hey, Thea, can you add that on there? You can book a meeting with me right from that website. You can send me an email. There's links to my social media right on there. Or if you'd like to follow some of my commentary about what's going on in my daily life, there's always my Twitter account, which is Thea Rachel, first and middle name. So feel free to find me on there, or just search for Dr. Thea Zunick. You can find me pretty easily. And if you want more food suggestions about Philly, I've got a whole list of them. You can just hit me up on any of those sites, and I'm happy to share my thoughts.
That's perfect. So to all the listeners, let's make sure we all go to Thea's website, theazunick.com. Let her know if you're interested in any of the services that she's offering, or just give her some feedback. Let her know what things you'd like to see on the website, and she'll put all of that on there. I certainly know the Greek University website has gone through multiple renovations over the last 4 years, so it's always a work in progress. I feel the same way, so I love that tactic. And we can't wait to work with you. I can't wait to see how all of this blossoms and you build this business. This is absolutely fantastic. Keep Thea in mind as a speaker, consultant, whatever you need. I think Thea is just a rock star. I can't say enough good things about Thea. I think in terms of building a career, we all have ups and downs. I certainly have had my share of ups and downs, and I've always known that Thea has always been there for me. In some of the times that were the most difficult, she would be the first phone call that I would make, and I'm sure that I just vented all of my frustrations on her, and she was able to listen to all of that and give me some helpful advice about where to go from that point forward. And I'm always going to be grateful to Thea for being there for me, because I'll just never forget it, right? You just never forget the people that were there when you were at that low point, that supported you and believed in you. And it was their belief in you that made you think that anything was possible. And Thea is one of those people. So Thea, I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm so grateful that you're my friend. We're going to be lifelong friends. I promise you, I'm going to support you forever. And I just want to say thank you for being you. You're just a really special person. You're a gem as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you so much. It really means a lot to hear, and it's like, it's a lot. I think one of the things about this field, especially fraternity and sorority and student affairs, that makes it special are the people that you meet. on trying to be the best person that I can be and being that person for other people. And it's not always easy, but if it's worth it, it wouldn't be easy, you know?
Yeah, totally agreed. And on behalf of all of us, it's not just me that you've helped. You've helped so many people along the way. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It means so much to all of us. And whatever we can do to support you, we're here. And I just can't wait to see what's next. I know you're a rock star and you are just going to absolutely knock it out of the park. So thank you so much, Dr. Thea Zunick. Thank you so much to our listeners for listening here. Please make sure that you share this with your friends and other people that might be interested in listening to what Thea has to say. Please like the video on social media, on YouTube. Make sure you listen to it on our podcast. You can just search for it, Fraternity Foodie, on iTunes or Spotify or Google Podcasts. Make sure you get the word out there. This is a special one. So thank you so much to our listeners. We will see you on the next episode of Fraternity Foodie. Bye for now.